What's going on, Guardians? TBL here, and while we're still at least a few weeks away from really learning too much more about Destiny 2 and much less getting our hands on it, we still got a lot of information from that Destiny 2 event to mull over and sort of chew on. And I gotta say, one of the things that has kind of been bothering me the most, and certainly a lot of other people in the Destiny community, is how exactly the change to the weapon system is going to affect not just PvP, but also the PvE side of the game. As most of you guys know, a quick explanation of the change coming to the weapon system in Destiny is that you're now basically going to have two sets of primary weapons. Your kinetic primary, which is just used for basic damage, and your elemental primary, which you can utilize against enemies to strip shields faster. That should be all familiar to you since it's not that much different than Destiny 1. The main change there is that weapons that will be considered primaries can also be energy weapons in Destiny 2. Stuff like auto rifles, hand cannons, pulse rifles, and sidearms. You know, etc, etc. And on the surface, I actually really like that change. Giving people the options to run with their favorite primary weapons as an energy weapon, so you can run with combinations like a hand cannon scout rifle combination or dual hand cannons if you want. And on its surface, I think it's a really good system for Destiny 2 since it solves one of the minor complaints from Destiny 1 in that there weren't enough elemental primaries. Or that people couldn't infuse, say, their favorite primary weapons with an element and use that all the time in PvE. And you know, out of that actually I think brings up kind of an interesting point that Datto touched on, where he stated that he doesn't really feel like energy weapons will really have too much of an effect on the game since they are in effect primaries. They're not like the special weapons of Destiny 1, you know, where they have the potential to deal higher damage than a primary would. They are just essentially primary weapons, and outside of just stripping shields, they don't really have much purpose. Which is definitely a valid point, but it's not really my biggest concern when it comes to these weapons. And that, of course, is borne by what happened to some of those special weapons from Destiny 1. As we all know, stuff like sniper rifles, shotguns, and fusion rifles are all being moved to what is basically the new heavy weapon slot, power weapons, and they're now going to share that slot with rocket launchers, grenade launchers, and swords. And this, in my opinion, is going to have some interesting effects on PvE. Now, for PvP, there's a lot of significance here. I think we can all agree that this was an attempt to kind of curb away from the sort of special ammo economy that we have in Destiny 1 right now. I've spoken to a couple of big PvP guys, and they all said that the system works fairly well for what it's trying to do. And while now in PvP you have to make the choice between, say, a shotgun, sniper rifle, or a rocket launcher, things are sort of balanced out with the frequency in which power ammo drops, twice every minute, every 30 seconds, and the overall availability of it, in that only one player, the player who actually gets to that box and presses that square button, is going to be the one who gets it. This is good because it solves a lot of the problems surrounding special weapons and how they work in Destiny 1. Bungie no longer has to balance around, say, shotgun rushing, the reliance upon sidearms, and it solves the big ammo issues that were so prevalent in Destiny 1 and creates an environment that's a bit more focused on primary play. Or at least that's what I'm hoping. Of course, I don't have my hands on Destiny 2, so I can't really make too much of a judgment call there. But from everything that I got to see, this change works pretty well in PvP. But that's not really what I'm worried about. After all, I'm definitely more of a PvE guy when it comes to Destiny. And on that front, I've definitely got some questions and some concerns. Now, much of my concern stems from how much of a fundamental change this weapon system is from Destiny 1. Under the new system, you now have to choose between those heavy-hitting options, stuff like shotguns, stuff like sniper rifles, and stuff like rocket launchers. You're no longer going to be able to have that hand cannon, sniper rifle, rocket launcher combination from Destiny 1. And from now on in PvE, you're going to have to choose between 6 different options and how you want to approach that PvE environment. Do you want to get up close and personal with a shotgun? Do you want to stay mid-range with a fusion rifle? Do you want to stay long-range with sustained damage from a sniper rifle? Losing that ability to have both a sniper rifle and a rocket launcher for, say, damage on a strike or a raid boss is going to be a very significant damage loss for us. Because now, of course, without that combination, you're going to have to weigh your options a little bit more. Do you trade off that high burst damage from a rocket launcher to, say, utilize a shotgun and get tons more ammo? Do you give up the long-range utility to utilize something like a grenade launcher or a sword? And when I think about that, it ultimately leads me to the question of why we would have those types of changes in PvE. And hopefully it's because the PvE architecture has changed. And by that I mean to compensate for the loss of overall damage potential of Guardians out there, at least assuming that things are going to be the way they've been presented thus far. Perhaps the missions and encounters we're going to be facing in Destiny 2 are going to have less of a reliance upon big, tanky, bullet-spongy enemies, and more reliance upon, say, encounters that are mechanic-based. One of the biggest, best changes we got to see, in my opinion, in the PvE environment, with Strike specifically, was the change in Rise of Iron between the reintroduction of some of the old strikes. Sepix Prime and the Nexus Strike in particular stand out to me as a really great way to change up those encounters. The bosses themselves aren't just bullet sponges. They have great mechanics tied to them now, so that ultimately there's less of a reliance on how much damage you can deal and how quickly you can deal it, and more of a reliance upon managing adds and playing around with the mechanics that are tied to those fights. Breaking Sepix's shield or breaking the Nexus shield by introducing something like the Aegis Shield Relic were a really great way to reinvigorate those strikes, and I really hope that's the way strike architecture has been built up in Destiny 2, with less of a reliance upon those bullet spongy enemies and more of a reliance upon playing some sort of mechanic. Since under this new weapon system, I really couldn't imagine facing an enemy like, say, Year 1 pre-nerf Valis to Auric with the kinetic energy weapon power weapon system. That would probably be a nightmare. But overall, making enemies less tanky and making encounters a bit more focused on roles and mechanics definitely seems to be the way Bungie wants to move forward. And if that's the case, well, hopefully the loss of damage output won't hurt too bad. And of course, from what we've seen, ammo for power weapons definitely seems to be very generous in PvE. Ultimately, I think this change to the weapon system was one that was specifically made to address Destiny 1's problems with PvP. And in PvP, it works very well, helping to promote a diverse environment for primary weapons while also keeping those powerful one-shot kill weapons within a certain niche. But in PvE, I'm really not so sure how well this system's going to work out. While I think having the variety of primary choice we do now is a good thing, I'm still a little bit iffy on the total effectiveness of energy weapons in PvE, and I want to see exactly how strikes and raids and other PvE content is gonna be built with this new power weapon system in mind. And ultimately, I guess for me, it kind of feels like there might be too many weapons shoved into the power weapon slot and kind of competing for utility there. I don't know, I guess we'll just have to wait for the beta and see. Anyways, those are my thoughts for now, Guardians. Hope you guys enjoyed. Be sure to let me know what you guys think of the weapon system changes down in the comment section below. I know it's definitely a hot button topic, so I want to hear what you guys have to say. But that's it for this one. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, I am the Black Link. You Guardians, stay frosty.